Okay, we will call the December 5th meeting of the Jericho Planning Commission to order. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Hopefully, everybody had a lovely holiday. Sabina and Linda were just saying this is our first meeting in basically a month. So it's been a nice break. For the agenda tonight, we actually have a pretty straightforward, mostly business only agenda. We'll approve minutes. We do have to take action on an updated report that goes, that's part of the package for the public hearing, which just will make a statement about the changes that the select board made at their public hearing. Then we're going to hear about a project that the DEI committee is doing. And then Linda has a few updates for us, and then sharing information from the rest of us, any other business, and then planning for our next meetings. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda? Okay. Any public comment? I don't see any public on the Zoom, and we don't have any public here in the room. Okay, so the next item is, hi Heidi, the next item is to approve our minutes of November 7th. I have a motion to approve.
I move we approve the minutes from November 7th.
Sabina, thank you. And the second?
Second.
Wendy, thank you. Does anybody have any corrections or changes for the minutes? Okay, we'll approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
This is online now.
Chris, do you want to approve? Do you want to vote to approve the minutes? You can unmute and vote.
I would like to vote to approve, yes.
Nice
you
photo.
hear
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, we can hear you. But we're like mesmerized by your photo. It looks like you're in like the Himalayas or something.
There's the Wind River is in Wyoming.
Nice. Wow, it's beautiful. Any abstentions? Okay. Then the next item is to get our ducks in a row for the town plan. And Linda has some information about this.
Yeah, I'm gonna share a document. Hang on a second. I should have opened this up while we were sitting here chatting, but I didn't. So I apologize. Sorry, bear with me a moment. Where's the one?
No worries.
It's right next to the Zoom. This one.
Just realizing this end of the seat of the table is really got a lousy view of the
Yeah,
screen.
Want us to move down a little?
Yeah.
No, it's not super important. I think I can see it.
There we go. Like, there we go. Okay, it wasn't plugged in. That was the problem. Oh. Oh wait, I gotta do the share screen. Okay, Chris, can you see my screen? You should be able to do that.
Again,
Okay, you got it there. Okay, so this report is required by state statute to accompany the plan. And it's the exact same report that you all reviewed at the previous meeting on November 7th that went with the plan to the first select board hearing. And the only thing that is different is down here at the bottom, where I highlighted. Sorry, this is a long document. All right, here we go. So since the plan has been changed between the end of the first select board hearing and the second and final select board hearing, the report needs to describe the changes and confirm that the plan as is still compatible with the state statute planning goals. So what I attempted to do here in this highlighted section is to describe the types of changes that the select board approved and had made to the final version of the draft, and then a statement at the bottom confirming that the plan, the changes were not substantive and that the plan is still in compliance with the legislative goals. So that's what you're being asked to consider to approving this, to go to the select board for the second town plan hearing. Does that all make sense?
I realized we probably should have asked you for this ahead of time, so if you're not able to do this, that's okay, but a recap actually of what happened at the select board, because where I was just saying, oh, we haven't met since November 7th.
Right.
There was this big momentous event
That's
that
right. I
happened.
assumed everybody was there.
I know,
didn't
but
see
everybody,
all of that.
I assumed that too.
Yes,
So
thank
I'm
you for
realizing,
reminding us.
let's set the stage and
Right.
tell people who weren't there what happened.
Perfect. Okay, I will attempt to do that. So at the town plan hearing, we had great participation. I thought there were maybe 8 to 10 people in person here. And Susan and Wendy and Sabina were all here. The comments from the public at the hearing were all kind of lined up with things that we had already heard. I can't think of anything that stood out as like a, hey, wait, like we didn't consider this. So that was affirming. And let's see, then after the hearing closed, the select board had a really good discussion of both the comments that came in from the planning commission on the spreadsheet that you all reviewed preceding that meeting, as well as the content of what people had said during the hearing. They approved making all the changes that the planning commission had recommended in the spreadsheets. And then there were some additional changes that I think came from SJ primarily related to the housing sections of the plan. Am I leaving anything else, Susan?
But and the how, which were all pretty minimal. Her changes were also clarifications.
Yes.
It wasn't anything new.
Yeah.
We did have a couple of people who said it was a good plan, and nobody said it was a terrible plan.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yep.
that was great.
And the select board's discussion, they did kind of deliberate on a few items. They did review again the ideas of expanding the select board and changing to a town manager. And so we addressed they addressed it kind of among themselves, and we addressed it with them, really just kind of explaining a little bit more about the why. And they also had some reservations about the town garage being included. They were kind of like, well, why is that necessary? Because we all know that we need to do that project. And we said that because it's a big project and it's going to be really expensive, it would be kind of like an oversight if it were not identified as part of the plan. And did they have any equity questions that you remember, or any other discussion that you recall?
Just about the amount of time, there was a lot of discussion about the process.
The process, yeah,
And clarify.
being not ideal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but they seem to be resolved with fulfilling their responsibilities, I thought, at the end of it.
yeah.
Um,
Linda gave a similar presentation, so she reminded them that while it might feel, she didn't say this exactly, but I think it was clear that while it might feel rushed to them, the plan, actually the first draft of the plan's been available for everyone to read since the middle of July. Joe Flynn, it was his very first meeting as a select board member. He seemed pretty engaged. He had a very good understanding, I thought, of the difference between the plan and the zoning,
yes,
because they kind of went down a little bit of a discussion, and he was able, I thought, to bring them, if I'm remembering this right,
Yeah.
bring them back into like, well, that's a zoning thing. That would be after the fact. This plan is basically directing what the zoning will do. So I felt very victorious, I would say, coming out of that hearing, that the comments were basically pretty positive,
Mhm.
and that they voted to approve and they voted to warn the second hearing. They voted to approve the edits.
Mhm.
And David was there also,
Oh,
and
right, yes.
he helped clarify a number of things also.
Mhm.
Right, so
Yeah.
that was that.
Yeah.
Okay, so now this report is the outcome of that hearing. And they warned the second hearing for December 19th, which is our meeting. So we gave them our meeting. I don't know if you remember that from last time,
Mhm.
which is a Tuesday night, which is
Yeah.
after Hanukkah, before Christmas holidays, before school vacation. It just seemed like it fit in the best. And since we are somewhat on hold, we thought that was a good solution for the timing. Okay,
And that'll be at 7 o'clock as well. I've been to 6:30.
6:30.
30.
So you would like a motion to approve this report?
Yes.
Okay. We want to make a motion to approve this report?
I would be happy to.
Heidi, thank you.
I'll
Second,
that.
Sabina, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the report as prepared by Linda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Can we see Chris here?
I approve. I'm in favor.
Excellent. Okay. So then that brings us to the next topic, which is the hearing. So as I just mentioned, the hearing is on December 19th at 6:30. And it's going to be a select board meeting. We were curious to know if anybody from the planning commission would like to attend or could attend, wants to attend. If maybe you could let Linda know. And Linda's, you said even if we all attend, we don't have to warn it as a meeting if 4 or more of us attend, because it's not our meeting.
Correct.
We're
and
just
we will-
participating.
The planning commission will not be doing any work at that meeting, so that's
Mhm.
why we don't have to warn it. But you can attend.
I'll go.
Yeah, I'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should all go.
It's just our regular day, right?
Yeah.
Right,
It's already-
yeah. So, right, is it, so it would just be a half hour early?
Yeah, an hour earlier, so I gotta figure out basketball carpool.
Right.
Yeah, but it's gonna end a half hour earlier.
Oh,
Maybe.
Well,
It's
we
a
don't,
delicate, it's such a cluster.
we don't have to stay for the whole meeting, because the hearing is its own
Right.
thing.
Yes.
But then, is it gonna be on their agenda to approve the plan?
Yes,
It is,
Ooh.
okay.
it will likely be the next agenda item following. Well, we'll probably do like we did last time, close the hearing, and then their first agenda item will be discuss what they've heard, if they've heard, if anything has been heard, followed by approve. Which we're hoping that will happen. If something comes up unforeseen and they are not feeling like they're ready to approve it, we do still have the first select board meeting of January, where it could be approved at that meeting, and we'd still meet the deadline where the other plan wouldn't expire. So we have a little bit of breathing room, but let's all just hope that it gets approved. I mean, because I feel like we've solicited a lot of feedback, and if there are people that haven't yet said what they want to say, hopefully it won't be significant enough to knock us off the tracks, but I wouldn't anticipate that.
But wait, I have a question. Hasn't the select board already? I don't understand, I guess, exactly what's going to happen, because hasn't the select board already had their chance to raise any major concerns?
Yes, they have, but by states, as required by state statute, there needs to be 2 select board public hearings about the town plan.
Right, but wouldn't it be unexpected for the select board themselves to have an issue at this point?
Absolutely.
Okay,
But it's
So
possible somebody
it's
from
really-
the public could have an issue with it. And it was not there earlier.
right,
Yes.
okay.
Does that clarify?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And then also, just to remind people, if you're looking for bedtime reading, Sabina, you have gone ahead and posted. David's provided to you version 4, is that right?
Yes, everything that I have been given is up. There was an illness from the team, the New Hampshire team, and so there was a little bit of a delay with the complete edits. Do you know that I saw an email from David today saying it was getting closer to being done. Anyway, is a volume 1 still has the comments on the side.
It's the marked up
It's the
version.
marked up version, but so that's there, and then volume 2, the edited version of volume 2 is there completely
Like
So-
clean.
clean.
Yes.
Yeah. So as soon as I get it from David, which sounds like it will be within the next 24 hours, I'll swap that out for what's up there now. He just thought we should have a placeholder so
Yeah.
that we could be totally legit.
Yep. Okay, so if anybody wanted to see, gee, what was changed from version 3 to version 4, they could go to the Join in Jericho website.
Mhm.
They can look up on the town plan project and they can see volume 1.
It's
And
all
volume
there in the
2.
sequence. They're
all
all
there.
there. So
Yep.
I left everything up.
Okay. Great. Thank you for doing that, Sabina.
No
That's-
problem.
Yeah. It was very also gratifying to hear Linda talk to the select board about all the various channels, communications channels that the planning commission used over the year, like in person and online, and the website was really a key component of that. Okay, anything else on the town plan? Kind of a little anticlimactic by the time we get to it for us, but I do think it's prudent for us to be a little bit treading water until the plan's completed. It's kind of working out beautifully with the end of the year. Linda and I just started talking briefly about a work plan for 2024, kind of assuming that the town plan's adopted. And we thought it would be great to actually embark on that planning with the town plan actually adopted. Kind of like our marching orders. It's like, okay, we got our marching orders, so. Okay, anything else on the town plan? All right, Wendy, can you give us an update on this project with the DEI committee?
Yeah,
Do
I
you have
s-
your presentation or do you want me to share it?
if
I
you can
have it.
share it, I just
Yeah.
need to, I'm just gonna pull it up here so I can
Yep.
see it better. So Susan asked me to share with you all, some work that the DEI committee is doing regarding town meeting and gauging how Jericho residents their experience with town meeting, their their perspectives about Australian ballot versus in-person on-floor voting. And this was in response to really kind of asking questions about how accessible is in-person town meeting, particularly the voting on the floor for the budget and articles. So that's the origin of the discussion. And so as a first step, the committee wanted to see, you know, what did Jericho residents think? And then we also did some data gathering about attendance in town meeting over the past, what did we go back to, 2018? Both for in person and then who actually showed up to vote for the for ballot voting. So if you go to the Join in Jericho site under the DEI committee, you'll see some work that the committee's done. We put up a survey, thanks to Sabina's help in doing that. It was up for about 2 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And-
Got 72 responses, which I thought was pretty good for 2 weeks. Definitely helped with putting it out on Front Porch Forum because we got some spikes the days that those messages went on the forum. And we were asking, you know, first of all, do you attend town meeting regularly? The last time they attended town meeting, and what are we looking at here? Yes, so this is about, who's attending and who has not attending. The colors don't they get better in terms of clustering the strongly agree and strongly disagree as in subsequent questions. This one is probably a little bit harder to decipher because they're separated. But below the box, you can see a summary. So that 33% agree, that includes folks that said strongly agree or just straight up agree. And the 57% includes the categories of strongly disagree or just straight up disagree. So you can see that here, in this case, 57% of the people do not regularly attend town meeting.
I think it's awesome that they don't go, but they chose to fill out the survey.
Yes.
Because that says to me that it's not just people who are interested in
Yeah.
town stuff that come to meetings.
Mhm.
Or that there are people who are interested and can't go because it's during a work.
Oh, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that there are people that are interested in,
Yeah.
but they are not going
Yes.
for whatever reason.
That came off, that was pretty
Yeah.
clear in the results.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just, we're just trying to get a sense of the respondents, when the last time they went. So the majority of folks, were coming out,
Their summary, oh, there's not.
in that summary there. So that was, what is that, 37% never?
Yeah.
Right?
20, was it set to 27.8 is the ones who attended last year? In
This year.
2023, this year?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
And they get the questions.
interesting,
scheduled.
that's almost the opposite of what you had on the slide before. 37% say they never do, but was it 57 disagree? That's important.
I don't know
so
what they say. is
Why would the
important.
people who, well, you get
This is just
regularly attend, okay,
Regularly attend.
sorry, misinterpreting.
So here's where we get into a little bit more of information about attendance, and you can, so it's 56% are saying that they agree with the statement that it's difficult for them to attend town meeting. The next question we asked them to say why, if they chose to say why. And so most of it is related to work responsibilities. But note here that there were 72 responses total, only 50 people responded here.
Hmm.
So there's a little bit of a dip. Um,
But don't you think that's just because the 22 people can go?
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah, where it's not difficult for
Right,
them.
right.
Yeah.
Was there any
So-
opportunity for those that selected others to?
That's the next
add-
slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's some examples of other COVID. Some people are also poll workers, so they can't participate. Some people are saying that they're uncomfortable speaking in public. So there are varieties of reasons, but by far the most was work responsibilities. And so this is asking them folks directly now, are you more likely to vote if you could vote by Australian ballot? And the overwhelming, pretty strong response saying, yes, they agree with that statement. And so here we wanted to see really if people thought, would Australian ballot be damaging to Jericho's democratic process? And so most folks do not think that it would be damaging. 69% disagreeing with that statement.
But although a lot of people said they either don't go or they find it hard to go, right? Because there was a large number of people that have never gone. That was a question, like, when's the last time you went? And a lot of people said never.
Mhm.
So if you've never gone to town meeting, how can you assess? Or maybe you can assess, but would your assessment be different if you had gone versus if you've never gone? It's sort of like, you know what I mean?
You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
But I think people were looking at this really from a higher level, like really understanding that I can't go, but I get that it would be much more democratic and fair if it was by Australian ballot. I mean, almost to a letter, people
Yeah.
said that in the comments.
Yeah, and this one I thought was
Mhm.
really interesting. So even people who cherish town meeting, and there was a number
A
of
lot of good
comments
comments.
that, you know, rightly so, like this is a long held tradition and that it gives them a chance to interact with neighbors and understand issues better. But even those that you might have that beliefs and perspectives about town meeting, you still think that, or 90% of you of this sample size thinks that it would provide greater access to town decision making.
Yeah, I think that's Susan's point, though. It's, if you haven't ever been to a town meeting, how do you know that it's not more democratic than getting a piece of paper and voting on it? Because in a town meeting, you can hear the debates going back
I
and
think
forth. You
this
can
is
be a part of those
really about
debates.
access.
Yeah, so I think
It's
that's.
about-
I think it's about access.
Yeah,
Yes,
so it was
totally
a
about
problem with the
access.
question.
Yeah,
It's if you go back to the question is a compound question. So it doesn't say
Mm.
negatively impact access to the democratic process. It says
Right.
negatively impact the democratic process, which people could have interpreted in 10 different ways. So
Yeah.
I actually think this is a question that does not provide meaningful
that's a really good point.
information in its response, because there's so many ways that this could have been interpreted
Yeah,
as a question and therefore answered as a question. I think the next one about access is sharper
yeah,
and gives you more. They're telling you about access. It's not telling you about the value of being together, the value of deliberation. Like there's the neighborly stuff, there's the deliberation piece.
Mhm.
That is
Mhm.
part of what we conceive as the democratic process in town meeting, but it's both. And so we can't, calling it just the democratic
Mhm.
process, I think we'd need to ask it in a couple of different ways.
Mhm.
right.
So I think the comments that you heard, probably like the writing comments, were probably a mix. It was great access. I got to see my friends and family and neighbors I don't see. We got to dig in conversation or deliberation in a different way rather than just voting, all of which are different components that people might have been answering to or not. Right. And so
Right,
for
you don't
some,
know.
right. And then for some people, they're just going to say, well, if there's no access, then who cares what happens when it's there, because I
Right.
can't get there.
Right.
Right. So I
Yeah.
just would say personally, like as a survey question and response, I would throw out that last one as being meaningful. And I'm standing by that. I realized that was kind of harsh. Sorry.
It's okay. This
It's
was-
always
you know,
easier in the rear view,
Yeah.
Wendy.
Yeah.
You know, right?
Absolutely. And this is really just all about taking the pulse.
Right.
So
No,
this is,
yeah,
and ultimately, this kind of decision is going to be up to residents.
Right.
who
And
vote.
I think so I'm just saying, this gives us a really
Yeah.
strong, like I think a stronger and clearer answer than the previous one.
I don't remember what question is next. Okay, so here's some qualitative comments.
Is there a way to
So-
make this one a little bigger? Or will it just make it harder to see? Oh, thank you.
That's good.
Mhm.
So these are not, of course, all of the comments. These are just themes that we pulled out of the qualitative comments. There weren't a lot of verbiage really. I would say, and Sabina chime in here, it's really about folks wanting to be able to, or at least what they expressed is wanting to be able to discuss during the meeting, and that they felt that the discussion provided more context for choices that were being made. And they felt that the electorate would be more informed.
Is there a reason that there's an asterisk with the authentication of voter statement?
And this is from SJ. I think that was just kind of a,
That's kind of a weird thing to be saying.
it
It
was,
was a weird, yeah.
And that's basically
Was.
saying that the entire voting process is
Right,
susceptible to fraud.
maybe it's just take this with a grain of salt or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. It was the only one, it
Yeah.
only came up that one
It
time.
was one time, okay.
Was there any authentication of people walking in there?
I was just, I was thinking it was on the meeting one, but it's
Yeah.
not, it's on the ballot one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you can walk in, no, yeah, everybody you can raise your hand and vote.
Right,
yeah.
and who knows if they just misread.
So
And I-
Wendy,
Yeah.
I have a question. What
Yeah.
happens next with this information?
Well, it'll be on the website, but what the committee's gonna do is go to the select board this week and ask if the select board would either, and I'm gonna get this language wrong, but I'm just gonna use the word approve. I don't know whether that's the right language, but approve that an article be on town meeting day to see if the voters would want to vote by Australian ballot 2025, starting in 2025 for the budget. And then there's a corollary that we'd have to change. I don't think it's the charter, but there's something with it, perhaps in the charter that says that you can only vote yes or no articles on the floor. So first you'd have to change that to say
this-
you can have yes or no articles as a ballot and then say that the budget would be voted by ballot. So,
That seems to be an ironically flawed process for this particular issue. Because
It totally
the people who go to town meeting would probably prefer that it stays not be Australian ballot. So I don't understand how that works out in the end.
Town meeting, and I feel like it's a completely unfair process.
we had this discussion last night, Chris, and there is really no other way. Because that's the process that is
Well, it
that
just,
we have
it
right
feels, what feels unfortunate is that it's perpetuating the disenfranchisement of the people who can't attend the town meeting.
yeah.
Because they
But
can't
you're-
go to vote to have their voice heard. And so it seems like a tragically flawed process.
Yeah, and part of this was like to start the conversation, and maybe it won't pass this year, maybe it will, but we can keep going back. And we can talk to more and more people about it. We could, there's also, the select board also might want us to get either 5% or 10% of signatures of registered voters in order to get it as an article for town meeting. I think they have the authority to waive that, but if they choose not to grant that at the meeting on Thursday, then we'll do the petition, which also increases awareness of the
But
issue.
Would there be a way to have them, I guess the select board, put this to vote at a November vote where there's greater participation because more people can go?
I was just thinking the same thing, Chris, like, is it possible to ask to put it on the Australian ballot that we do already use?
But we would
No.
not be the first town to be doing this because
No.
so many other towns have already gone through this. And I think that they did do it on an Australian ballot to get full participation, but we can certainly go back and look at the record.
I would think
Jessica Alexander was there last night and along with John Abbott, and they were describing the process is that it would have to be a floor vote. No, I'm sort of deferring to them.
Yeah,
Because
well, but do you see my point?
Oh, absolutely, see your point. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Other towns did it, so point taken, other towns got over that.
Yeah, about
So-
30% of Vermont towns use Australian ballot.
Well, I guess
When
I guess I feel like it might be worth, assuming, well, if this doesn't pass, well, if it gets to a vote at town meeting day and it doesn't pass, I would think it would be worth pushing harder to find another avenue for what might be a more representative vote.
Mhm.
I find it kind of interesting that on the concerns about voting, we have less citizen engagement by Australian ballot, but on the benefits, we have more. Those seem to negate each other.
Yeah, and again, these are not actual quotes. This is,
Yeah.
we were just trying to. I think less citizen engagement in the concerns meant less dialogue. And really more citizen engagement on the ballot side is more participation.
more people.
More votes.
Did you, since a lot of the concern is access, did the committee consider other ways of expanding access which have been batted around before?
Like
Like-
hybrid.
Or like meeting on Saturday or meeting in the evening or meeting, having town meeting in person and then a week before and then the budget is after? Like, are there other ways of expanding access that would retain some of the benefits of town meeting, but would improve access?
Yeah, I think like having it on a Saturday or an evening would help with folks with work responsibilities. It would not necessarily help with folks whose disabilities preclude them from attending.
Did Jessica address that last night? Because I know she has information about the whole switch to Saturdays and how I recall her saying that it didn't really increase.
It
participation.
didn't increase participation. in that.
I was wondering
And
the
it's
same.
also the school vacation time, right? So there's a big chunk of
Right.
the population
That
is
just gone.
away.
Yeah, I was just thinking, and no, I'm outing myself, but you can track back my responses, but I was one of the 70 whatever people that responded. That we lived in Essex before we came here and they did the evening before that people would come and then the next day they would vote. So it was a bifurcated.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of trying, and maybe it did or didn't actually increase participation in the meeting, but I think on balance, it was like the Solomon's choice, right? It satisfied both people's ways of participating.
But during the evening meeting, people couldn't amend the budget
Yeah, they could, actually.
without a vote.
There was a vote about whether or not it could be amended before it went to a full vote on the Australian ballot.
Then that couldn't have been the night before though, because
Okay.
the ballots would have all been.
Right, then maybe it
Printed.
was a week before or something, but it was definitely
Well,
something.
My
like-
recollection is
here's-
it was the night before.
We talked about this a little bit with Jessica too, and she was saying that anything that's gonna be voted on needs to be
Warrant.
published
Yeah.
in the town report.
Right,
So,
So that's a really long.
which is like early
Yeah.
January.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're basically, yeah.
So that was problematic, because we were thinking of that too, like how do you retain that ability to amend the budget? And still have the vote.
Yeah.
By ballot, but it's really hard if all those articles have to be printed.
Yeah.
But does every financial decision need to be framed in terms of a budget amendment? Or could you like vote yes on the budget, $3 million, and then have a separate item either on the floor or on the ballot? I don't really know, but a separate item that says, oh, and by the way, we want to spend $40,000 on a playground, like
Sabina
as a
didn't
step,
do
like
that with the natural resources piece? Was it 3 years ago, 4 years ago that was approved?
the conservation reserve
Reserve
fund
Yeah.
was its own
Was
article.
article, right.
Yeah.
So
voted
Yeah.
separately from the budget.
But that was a particular case because it was a separate tax.
Right.
So I guess I'm kind of
Hmm.
asking the same thing. Not, if it's not a tax, so it doesn't have that quality about it. If it just has a quality of being like a spending item. Could it, so that way, could you have your cake and eat it too?
Would have
Like,
to-
could you,
The spending item would still have to be in the budget at some point.
well, that's what I'm asking. Can you have something that's sort of outside the budget?
A slush fund within the budget that we can use.
Or,
Is it fair
Yeah, I don't
enough
know.
to say that the DEI committee and or John and Jessica have taken advantage of the resources and knowledge of Vermont cities and the League of Cities and Towns to look and see the innovative ways that communities are struggling with the same issue?
I don't think John and Jessica are really charged with looking at this, so this is a DEI committee thing.
Okay.
So they're resource people, and so really the next step is for, like, we need to answer some questions and talk to some other towns.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I was thinking is that if given what's,
Yeah.
just giving what I thought I understood you were saying is you were bringing this for the consideration of the select board tomorrow or somebody's.
It is, just to be on the ballot,
Right,
right, or be an article, so then the committee would say, all right, we have between now and March to do public outreach and figure out answers to people's questions.
right. I think what I was saying is it might be premature to know what the article is, given there
Oh,
are,
the specific wording, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's all I'm wondering is like that
right, I agree
conception,
with that.
right? So that maybe tomorrow would make sense to get the concept that this is a core issue for
Mhm.
our community that we want to have addressed. We're not sure what solution we are offering yet because
Right.
there's more research or questions that need to be answered, but we think it's really important to bring it to the select board now so that there's enough time between now and March, at least to start the conversation or to move something productive forward that will not hem you into not having the best available sort of options for the community to consider
Mhm.
about which direction to go. If the goal, like, can we all at least agree that the goal is to increase access, that we have a paucity of access? It's problematic. We in Jericho believe we ought to make our democratic system more democratic by opening access, and that means we have to think of different ways
Mhm.
that we design our voting in our town meeting. And then maybe there's one or two options, I don't know, but at least like the first step is agreeing that we are ready for some kind of change, that it's a core value that we have. It's having the seeds there of the core value. And then having a little bit more time to research.
Right, and maybe it's not gonna happen for this town meeting, maybe it's
Right.
for the next one. But I do think you're right, that it's important to get that language.
Yeah, and I think getting it as a topic of conversation at the town meeting to plant the seeds and share the research that your crew does. Your crew, listen to me, your crew, that the DEI commission or others do about, here's what we know is like asking to give a report, here's what we know is happening and why we think it's important for us to make a change.
What is the current turnout at the town meeting? Do we know?
We do know, do you wanna go to the website? Generally, the in-floor votes is around 300.
300 out of a voting
Is there a slide
population
here
of,
with that?
Yeah.
how many registered voters do we
I
have?
can look on the, or, wait.
I don't
Yeah,
think,
but
I don't think there's a slide on that, but but it is on the website, it has it has the percentage of on-floor votes, the percentage of people who vote.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, there you go,
Yeah.
oh, it is there,
Okay,
it's
sorry.
small.
Saw this. I don't know if I can get it big enough for you guys. to
And so
see.
we're looking at 7 to,
It's 10 years of
There we
data.
go.
well, 23 is. Okay, yeah. TBD from 2022.
Oh, wow, 23 was super low. No, I mean 22, 20, whatever.
So 2020, when we had the last in-person one before COVID, was 7% of the voters turned out. Is that right? But you had absentee ballots of almost 50% of everybody voted at
Why
that
is
point.
2023 TBD?
They just, they don't have the numbers yet, like Jessica or whoever has those numbers didn't have that data yet.
Right,
So I couldn't read it.
Yeah.
This is total registered voters.
Yes,
So 2022 is 4,300. And of those, there were 652 people that turned in an Australian ballot, which represents 15%.
yes.
330 did absentee, which. So
50% of the total
absentee-
ballots.
Yeah, 50% of the total. But then, so for an example where you have town meeting. So 2020, which is a presidential year,
Yeah, and though,
although I don't know.
those
is
were
this the same-
estimates.
Is this the March Australian ballot?
yeah,
So the floor vote is people who showed up and voted in person.
300 people there in 1950, but what was on the ballot in March of
Right,
2020?
look, there were.
well, it could have been like Justice of the Peace
The
or
reserve
select,
fund was,
yeah.
Yeah, interesting to see the variation,
Right,
isn't
and
it?
this is really big, and then this is really big too, 2016.
Another election year.
The election year,
Right,
yeah.
so are those primaries? No.
Yeah,
Did we do
because
primary?
that,
Do we do primary on tax day? Oh, no, we don't.
No,
Primaries in-
And the
April.
in-person, their estimates,
right.
'cause no one like.
Yeah.
That- that's
Yeah.
like a-
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
you guys see the footnote?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
there were no in-person meetings.
Right.
Yep.
21 and 22. So the town budget was decided by Australian ballot. So it's not
Yeah.
like we've never done this before.
Right,
We have the experience of knowing.
but look at the turnout for the Australian ballots. It's way down. From 2020, it goes from an Australian ballots in 2020 of 1950 down to 2023 of 477.
Yeah.
That's a big
Right,
drop,
so this one was also,
election year.
well, but this was COVID too.
No,
so we.
COVID started
so-
No,
after
that-
town meeting day.
COVID started.
We went on shutdown.
weeks.
So we made it through, yeah, we made it through.
So I wonder why that was so high. And that's really high, and that's really high.
They are election years.
But
Maybe
that
people
column
feel
says
more
includes
civic being
absentee
gay.
ballot, so that's a summation.
Yeah.
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 But basically, it's like a magnitude of. It's like wild, like this is 2,000 people Australian ballot and only 250 people went to the meeting.
I think it's fair to say
Uh.
a minority of the electorate shows up at town meeting day to do a floor vote.
Mhm.
But floor votes cover things that are not on the Australian ballot, is that correct?
Yeah, it can be anything.
Yeah,
If I could diverge just for a second, I think the other really important thing, Wendy, that you said that might have gotten a little bit buried was that this also started because you were getting some support through the Center for Independent Living, which is an organization that is rightly calling out for improved access to voting for people who are not able to participate in person often, may have
Mhm.
bigger challenges. And so I think there's a piece of this in terms of an equity and inclusion perspective that is beyond just a fair and democratic process and people preferring one thing or another. I think there's a piece for the DEI group in particular to be able to call out, like, if we solve for the folks who are represented by the Center for Independent Living, or Independent Living, right? VCIO,
Mhm.
then we solve for everyone. If we solve for everyone else without thinking about people who are homebound, we are not actually walking.
Right.
but that's not true just of town meeting, that's true of any voting we do.
Well, it's exactly, but they're talking
Well-
about town meeting here, so I'm just saying that in terms of placing it in this conversation. That. Again, because there are ways in which town meeting as a format could be adjusted. To allow participation for people who are not able to come in person. Because of physical or economic limitations or difficulties through some kind of, combination remote and in person, or some kind of adaptive process. So I just want to, I just want to make sure that we don't lose that nuance in the ways that it's being thinking. I'm
Right.
sure the
Yeah.
DEI committees.
Yeah, it
got
has to
that
be
covered.
dual messaging for sure.
Yeah.
But Eric, something that you were saying though about town meeting is unique because the people who can't physically come to a location to fill out a ballot can get absentee ballots. You can't get that for the in-person floor vote. So that's what makes it
That's really
unique.
compelling.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
And what surprises me ultimately is how few people show up for it. You're looking at less than 10% of the electorate showing up for town meeting day, which in and of itself is inherently undemocratic.
Yeah.
And that is, talk about rule by minority. Anyway, so
Right. I mean, I think that it's a good reminder for us, even in the planning commission. The reason why I wanted to make sure that we were aware of this effort is because a lot of our projects are based on the town spending money in the budget. And so the participation in the budget and how the budget gets developed and approved is really key to our ability to get our work done. And also the planning commission in a way is sort of like a little microcosm of the whole town because, we worked on our whole town plan for a year and we used every trick in the book to try to get as much participation as possible. And even though, we all feel really confident that the plan represents what we heard, we also know that we heard from a small number of people compared to all the people that live here. I do think the data is pretty clear, though. You probably know this better, that if you're pretty cool with how things are going, you tend to go on your merry little way. And the lack of participation sometimes is a presumed agreement. And that, it's when people come out more when they disagree. So I always took comfort in that this past year, thinking that, look, we've explained what we're doing. All our materials are exposed. If people really had a problem with it, they would come forward.
Yeah, I think the 2017 in-person number at 400 is an indication of exactly that. I think a lot of people were surprised by the 2016 election outcome. And they felt like, wow, I better participate. I better show up.
Okay, is there anything you need the DEI committee could use or needs from the planning commission? Or maybe you could let us know.
Yeah, wait, definitely.
Okay,
Thank you.
and hopefully this feedback was helpful
Very
for you
helpful.
guys.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you
yeah,
to the
it's just-
DEI group.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
folks are,
It's an overdue conversation.
yeah,
Yeah.
Maria and SJ have been putting a lot of work in that.
Did you guys talk at all about, the select board has budget hearings, right? They have to have a certain number of warrant hearings, which most of us, I've attended several and I've been the only one there, it's pretty sparsely attended. So how do we going forward when we have more and more conversations about this? How do we increase the level of participation in the meetings that are already happening?
Right.
Part of me wanted to ask these imaginary people, hey, do you know that there are actually, meetings about the budget?
Right.
Because
You don't have to wait till town meeting to come up with your idea for
You don't,
a
but
bike rack.
but you get but the power of having your peers vote on it and being a decision maker
yeah, no, I
versus
just
someone
wanna know,
receiving your
I don't want to
suggestion.
change any of the stuff on town meeting.
Yeah,
I don't want to change that conversation. I want to know, how can we help the select board get better participation in
Sure,
that
right.
discussion?
Mhm.
Everything else, I agree, has to change, but it still would be great to have people talking about it before town meeting.
Because even if you go to Australian ballot,
Right.
you still want people to be informed and engaged and helping the select board prepare the budget.
Right. Well, there's and the school board does a really good job of it now, whether or not people participate or not, but they have special hearings. Like a few different hearings before the vote, like common.
Right, and they send postcards.
They're very proactive around the budget because there aren't usually people who come to a conversation. They just vote Australian budget.
Mhm.
And so it's their way to make sure that people are aware of what's in it.
Anyway,
And
Yeah.
again, just an example.
So
Okay.
making sure that the definition of access and engagement is broad enough to think of all these different touch points.
Mhm.
Okay, anything else on this topic? Thank you, Wendy.
Sure.
Okay, Linda, planners report, grant and project updates.
I don't have any visuals because I did not have time to prepare them. So I will just be reading from some notes that I did put together. So first project to update you all on is the Route 15 multimodal path, and that's the scoping study looking at either using the old railroad bed going from this part of town to Riverside, or having a path on the south side of Route 15. So the last action in that project was the consultant presenting alternatives at the select board meeting, which was back in, I think it was October.
Either September, October.
Was it September? Gosh, I don't have the date here. It might have been September. But at that time, it was noted that some of the information wasn't as accurate as we would have wanted it to be. So since then, the consultant has gone back to the drawing board to update the presentation. They prepared a written final report. They sent John and I a draft of that final report. A few weeks ago, we provided them with some additional comments and feedback. And I'm expecting that report to be done and accurate and complete by the end of the year. So next steps are going to be another alternatives presentation at the select board meeting, which I would expect to be in early 2024. And then the hope would be that the select board would choose to endorse one of the alternatives that are presented to them there. So that's the update on that. So that's still moving forward, which is good news.
Ask a question.
Yeah.
Could conceivably the select board choose not to do anything?
Yep.
So, it could, so they could either choose one or the other, say, no, neither work.
Yeah, and in
Okay.
these scoping studies, there actually is always what they call a no build alternative that is presented. So
Okay.
it's like the do nothing alternative.
Okay, so and does that include the consequences of not doing it? Because there's always a negative consequence to
Yeah.
inaction, but I don't know if every report would say what that negative consequence would be.
I'm trying to think how it's articulated. I know there's a table where it has all of the alternatives on one axis and then different benefits or challenges on the other axis, and it'll say like, yes, this one's good for this, and no, this one's not good for this. So I think that alternative is one of those that gets sort of ranked, but I don't think there's any like narrative
Okay.
in the report about
I don't know if you're
consequences.
allowed to ask for that at this point in time, if I'm too late to the party. But there's sometimes change doesn't happen because people don't take into account the cost of not changing.
Mhm.
Because by the time they've looked at proposed, almost every decision has a downside,
Right.
which leads it to being easier and just not to make a decision. In which case you have now forgotten the reason you were looking to make the decision in the first place.
Mhm.
So it's helpful to be reminded that the cost of inaction is the pressures on pedestrians currently, the accidents that we're having, the increased growth, like,
Health and the health.
you know, and whatever it is, right? That it is really helpful to make sure that that is equally weighed.
Mhm. Okay,
The indecision is equally weighed with the downside of whatever proposal is being put together, because every proposal has a downside.
I would love it if you could attend that meeting and say that.
Sure,
Cause that would be helpful, and I can also share that feedback with the consultant.
yeah,
But I think what's really gonna help move the needle with those types of projects are people showing up at those meetings and saying things like what you just said, and things like, yes, I want this, instead of what we usually get, which are people that show up and say, no, I don't want this, and here are all the reasons it's bad.
right, and I don't want this one, you should choose that one, then they argue about which
Right,
one,
not
and then
my
nobody
backyard.
doesn't do it, and then you're.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
so
that's
that's,
coming.
that's great feedback, so thank you.
Do you know when that's gonna be?
I haven't scheduled it yet,
But you're thinking
I'm
January-ish.
thinking January, but I have to work around the budget and all the town plan stuff that the select board has coming up, so I
Okay.
can't give you a specific date.
I will mental note and paper it here, okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
Next project, the Riverside Sidewalk, which is a grant funded project that the town is working on design and engineering for, and that sidewalk will be on the eastern side of Route 15, originating right by where you turn into Jericho Market
Mhm.
and going up to Park Street. So that project has been sort of in a holding pattern because the preliminary designs were developed and they were submitted to the state for an environmental review, and that typically takes about 6 months. And we're getting close to that 6-month mark. So I hope that project will gain traction in the near future. The next step for that one will be to have a public informational meeting to present the preliminary plans, and Susan and I talked about potentially scheduling that in coordination with a planning commission meeting or as part of a planning commission meeting in early 2024. So does that sound like it would be a good topic for all of us to weigh in on?
Is that gonna be a bike path or just a pedestrian only?
It's gonna be a sidewalk.
So 4
So-
feet, 6 feet,
I think it's 5 feet.
I think.
Yeah, like concrete, 5 foot wide. So it's on the Jericho Market side of Route 15.
Yeah,
It's gonna start right where you would turn into Jericho Market.
okay,
It's gonna head towards Underhill
yeah,
and end at the town line, where Park Street intersects Route 15.
Is there a sidewalk on the other side of the street there already?
Yes,
There is.
There is.
on the Underhill side, there is one. I thought there was-
No, on Route 15.
It is a done deal.
On Route 15, from the Underhill
It's
Town line.
happening.
okay.
Yes.
going
Sorry.
east, there is already a.
Jericho
Okay,
Market
yes, it's
to Park
happening.
Street.
Have money.
I thought it was on the
Yeah.
other side of the road.
I thought it was on the other side of the road too.
Yeah, in Jericho.
I know it's in Jericho between the market or the gas station and the market on
Yeah.
the left side heading out of town. I don't know what's past.
Trying to like
I-
envision walking during the market. The harvest
Well,
market.
We know,
Yeah.
it's on the other side of the road,
Yeah, it's
and
on
the plan for like 100 years has been to have a sidewalk on both
Oh.
sides of the road.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Sabina's just saying, I thought that was a done deal. It's a done deal in terms of like, it's an alternative was selected, it's been approved. We got a grant, it's right now in engineering, like detailed engineering.
Yeah.
This environmental review, so the public information section, we talked about this, is not a like, hey, what do you think?
Right,
It's literally, this is what is happening
right.
Yes.
in front of your house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So this is,
Come learn about it.
come learn about
ask
it, but,
questions,
right,
But it's happening.
right, there's not, and
Mhm.
I mean, there might be minor itty bitty tweaks that could happen to
Yeah,
the plans based on that
potentially.
meeting, but that's a totally different situation than the first one that you
Right.
described, which is more like, we're still trying to figure out what we're gonna
Right,
do.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
But, in addition to the meeting, is there something like when you're in a butter and a decision, something's happening where everyone will get, who actually lives right there will get something? like a message personally that this thing's gonna happen in front of my house?
For Riverside?
Yeah.
I think they already did.
They
Yeah.
did? Okay.
I think
Yeah, they would
that was
have
early on in the project.
Yeah.
That's what-
earlier on,
Okay,
Yeah.
and my plan would be to send them a letter in the
Yeah.
mail in
Yeah.
advance of this
Yeah.
information meeting, so that they would hopefully choose to participate and learn more about it.
okay. That's it. That was, I meant, like, there's a special outreach to those folks.
Yes,
Yes, beautiful.
yeah, and hopefully they'll come.
Mhm, mhm. Or not, because they'll be so fine that it's not a big deal and only the
Right,
ones who
right,
complain show up, right?
Yeah.
They're-
They're just so excited, they can't wait for the sidewalk to be built.
Right,
They don't care exactly where it's gonna go or
right.
whatever.
I know the Jerry Hill folks were excited when I talked to them about that because they said, oh, good. We will plan excursions because they go on walks and now they can do a whole loop around the triangle area. So they were like, yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
good, good.
I was thinking you meant the.
Not the
Hard.
hard
Yes.
community.
Jerry Hill Senior.
Yeah. So, but the time frame for that project, the Riverside sidewalk being built, it's not going to be next summer because we're not far enough along it. It could be the summer after that.
Is construction.
Yeah. Mhm. We'd have to basically have everything ready to put the thing out to bid now-ish, like within the next like month or two. In order to build it this coming year in 2024, and we're not there, so I think it's more likely to be 2025. But it's a done deal, it's happening. So,
Yay.
yeah, that's good. The wastewater feasibility study, the draft 60% report was due today. I did not see it in my email yet. So I'm expecting that it'll be sitting there waiting for me tomorrow morning. And that report was stalled out for a while because, John and I felt it was really important that we reach out to any landowner whose parcel is identified in that report as having potential to be a site for a potential wastewater treatment facility. And it took some time to get in touch with all those people and have the conversations that we wanted to have so that we didn't catch anyone off guard by seeing themselves identified as a location for a wastewater facility.
Any vociferous objections to that?
What's that?
Did
Any
anybody freak
vociferous
out?
Objections?
No, nobody freaked out. I wouldn't say freaked out. No, I think, some have been willing to proceed with caution but they're all seemingly willing to have conversations about it. No one was like, yay, yes, please build this either. So, I think it's just gonna take time and more conversations. It's a pretty significant thing to be proposing.
What does draft 60% mean?
So that's a good question. The way that this report is done is that it's literally like 30% of the report is complete and then 60% and then 90%. So
Okay.
in the table of contents that we get with the report, it identifies all of the sections and only like 30% of them will be done in 60%. So the 30% report was the needs assessment. And so that was summarizing the survey that we mailed out to all of the residents, asking them about their interest in a potential, connecting to a potential system and ask for information about their existing septic system. So that was it. And it helped the consultant figure out, they did some kind of calculations to estimate how many gallons per day of wastewater treatment was needed. So that was the 30% report. The 60% report will include identification of sites that could potentially serve for a facility and discuss like some of the pros and cons of each alternative.
When do we get to hear the price?
That's a great question. I'm not sure if it's going to be in the 60% or the 90%. Susan, you were in a meeting with me where we heard some very preliminary numbers on like 1 or 2 different scenarios.
So I thought that the 60% would include some of those wags, as we used to call them.
Well, that's.
Yeah, yeah, you might be right about that, and I should have brought the table of contents down here so I could.
Is the 30%
there.
report on Join in Jericho somewhere to be, that where we could read it, or is that not appropriate?
It's not yet because it had some errors in it that we sent feedback to the consultant about, and we
Yeah.
didn't want to put it out until those were fixed.
Okay,
So,
but potentially the 60% report will be available for public.
yeah, that's what I'm
Viewing.
expecting, but not, I'll receive it and
Yeah.
we'll review it before it goes out.
And let's say the report is done tomorrow, it's in your mailbox, then what happens? Does it go to the select board? It's gonna come to us?
No, what would happen first would be, John and I would review it for accuracy and any corrections that need to be made. Then we would schedule, so the other thing I didn't mention, but there will be 3 meetings, public information meetings. Scheduled, one for each of the 3 villages that we're considering building a wastewater facility for, where the consultant will present the information, both from the 30% needs assessment and the 60% alternatives report.
And so is there a role for us?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
I would hope that you would each attend at least one of the public meetings. Trying to think of what we said in the town plan regarding,
I would think that we would want to participate in that meeting, and just in making sure to set the context for current challenges, growth. Here's what the town plan says. Here's
Yeah.
why it's important. Here's how this is going to fit in for the next 20 years. John's a great engineer. But I think it shouldn't be just kind of in a vacuum and a very technical discussion. I think
Agreed.
it should be a strategic discussion
yeah,
that we should help frame.
yeah.
Not sure who should be the messenger exactly, but so I almost would want to have a discussion on the planning commission agenda in advance of those meetings to kind of figure out how we would want to participate, if the timing of that could work.
Yeah.
I don't want to hold
see.
things up and
Yeah.
delay, but especially since we don't have our agenda set yet for January, February,
Yeah.
so we could be like right on it.
Yeah, I think it will depend on a few other things that we have in the queue.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I would expect those meetings to happen in January or early February. Yeah,
maybe it's just one of us with somebody from the select board, or maybe it's you.
right.
I don't
Maybe
know.
John or,
Right.
yeah,
I just want to influence the messaging.
no, I think that's a great suggestion, and yeah, John Ashley, who's the engineer, is a brilliant engineer, not a great public speaker.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's,
Charming as hell.
yeah,
Yeah, and
Super nice
smart.
guy.
Yeah.
all right, so the next grant that I wanted to talk about is the bylaw modernization grant. You will maybe recall that we discussed this grant opportunity several meetings ago and decided to apply for funding, to update the form-based code in Riverside, and also look at the village center zoning for updates, to remove obstacles for affordable housing. Susan and I had a conversation after that planning commission meeting when I was working on the grant application, because I think at that meeting we had all been thinking, yeah, we'll focus on Riverside, but it occurred to us that the village center zoning district that we decided to do some work on is actually covers all 3 of the villages. It's the same zoning district, which I think presents a good opportunity to kind of consider how any changes to the village center zoning district will impact all 3 villages. So we went ahead and applied for that grant with that context. So if you're looking at the form-based code in Riverside and looking at the Village Center zoning district, which is 3 separate geographic areas for housing forward zoning updates. And I haven't heard back from anyone on that grant, but in their timeline, they said notifications would come in December. So stay tuned about that. If we don't get that grant, we will still do the form-based code zoning updates with David because we already have an agreement with him to do a zoning update. So
Is energy efficiency part of housing forward zoning?
trying to think what it said in the criteria. I don't remember that being part of it. I remember it being pedestrian oriented developments. Doesn't call that out specifically. No.
Does that necessarily preclude us from considering it when we're revising zoning? And we don't have to talk about this now.
Yeah.
It's only pertinent if we get the grant.
Right,
We have
right,
things in the
right.
zoning regs already that talk about energy efficiency.
It does, but it may be an opportunity to
Just
bump it up.
straighten it up and bump it up.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's,
Yeah,
if we
I-
could
I
do it
think
before, we can
If
do
we
it
get the
again.
grant, I can ask that question.
Okay.
I think you could frame it in terms of long-term affordability,
Right.
so could make the argument that it should be
Mhm.
part of it,
Mhm.
it should be considered.
We should do all of Riverside geothermal.
Hmm.
They're doing it.
That's what Sabina wants to do.
Yeah, they're doing it at one place in Massachusetts. They had it on Marketplace last week and I meant to send you guys the link to it. I think so, yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Framingham, Mass.
Yeah.
They're developing a whole, like, whatever, 10-acre site or something, and
Oh,
they're
wow.
doing it all interconnected geothermal,
That's pretty cool.
everything
Very
being
cool.
built there.
Neat. There's a website online called the Vermont Geothermal Network Alliance, I think. That's how I put it out. And there is a ton of very cool information on there. With
Mhm.
great visuals, great details. all
Mhm.
there. Hmm. Neat.
And I've talked to a few people just building single-family homes that are doing it.
Mhm.
I sold one home a year ago that had it, and they said their total electric bill is like $45 a month for heating and electric.
Mhm.
Like, it's like nothing, 3,000 square foot house.
Wow. Neat.
Cool.
I have a couple other things that are in the works. One is the UVM Leahy Institute for Rural Partnerships Capacity Grant that, I think Wendy or Sabina brought to our attention. Wendy. We had a meeting to discuss potential projects for using that grant. We being Susan, Wendy, myself, SJ, John, Chris
Flynn.
Sabina.
Sabina. I think that's it. It was a big group. It was a brainstorming session. The ideas that we threw out, that we think would meet the criteria are potentially doing some wayfinding signage or branding for the trail connectivity and safe routes to school. Community outreach about ways to leverage existing housing stock to increase housing opportunities. And having help with developing an outreach strategy and communication plan for the wastewater project. And doing some climate resiliency planning.
I have a meeting with the grant coordinator on Thursday to see which one she thinks is most viable. However, I did look more carefully. You can submit more than one letter of intent an intent for an idea. For it,
That's intriguing.
one.
Throw enough stuff.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, so our
Yeah,
next
it's
step was
valid.
going to be for Wendy she was gonna vet those ideas to see.
Yeah.
Which, if any, seem viable from the funder's perspective. So stay tuned about that. The letter of interest for that is due the 18th of December, so it's relatively quick. And if we get invited to apply, is that January, I think,
I think end of January,
end of January?
and it's not a big grant, like, they have different tiers, but we were looking at a $10,000
Yeah.
seed grant in order to establish a relationship and then be eligible for larger grants.
Yeah, and I didn't provide too much background, but it's a new program that's intended to address rural challenges, which is, I think, exactly how they said it. So it's very broad and open to interpretation. So stay tuned about that. And that's it. Those are the main ones that I am carrying right now. So it's a lot.
Just a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll update the zoning and then we'll get a wastewater facility.
Right, right.
And don't forget about the capital budget too, right?
Well, and then just this came up today because I was the select board meeting hearing, which is not your project, but there's a discussion about the Lee River sidewalk.
Yes,
And so what you know about that, can you just tell us what you know about that?
sure. So if you're wondering what that project is, it's been in the works for, I think, at least 5 years. The town has a grant. And the original design was to build a sidewalk originating at Route 15, heading down Lee River Road towards the range on the right-hand side of the road. So and it was going to end at Sunnyview and have a crosswalk from Sunnyview over to where that was, come down here to Route 15. My understanding is that project got stalled out because there were space constraints. There's a couple houses that are very close to the road. And then there were some issues with getting easements from the landowners to do work on their property outside the town right of way. So the select board decided to investigate whether it was viable to construct the sidewalk on the opposite side of the road, which is the side that Sunnyview comes off of Lee River on. And so they're going to be discussing options for that this week at the board meeting. So the thing about those grants is also that if you get a grant and you engineer a project, but you don't build it, the town has to repay the money that they received for the engineering.
Oh, dear.
So,
And we already have the engineering grant.
yeah.
Oh.
And I don't know how much has been spent, but it's like, if we don't keep moving this project forward and investigate new alternatives to make it happen, the town would be obligated to pay back the money that they received to engineer.
And then Linda, didn't you also apply a second time for the MMU segment?
I did. That was in the summer and it didn't get funded.
Right,
But you're right. I am working on an application for that. That
right.
one's kind of off my list because it's almost done.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me. So I am preparing a new grant application. Well, it's reapplying for, it's called the Transportation Alternatives Program to try to get money again for the sidewalk that would start at the intersection of Lee River and Ethan Allen Road. So the road that goes to the range and go towards the high school. So that project is expensive because it involves a bridge over the river there. That's what's the real cost driver for that project. So I was unsuccessful this summer getting a grant from the Bike and Pedestrian Program. I'm going to reapply. The application's due Friday to get money from the Transportation Alternatives Program. They're both V-Trans programs.
We met with the wastewater guy like in the summer. And he's like, well, but one of the big things about the wastewater would be figuring out how to get the wastewater across that river. But if you have wastewater, it seems like you just, make the pipe go across the river. And I was like, well, couldn't we just build kind of like a sidewalk bridge on top of your wastewater pipe, and he did not think that that was crazy. If I remember right, didn't he kind of say like, maybe you could maybe do that? Like, we could look at that?
Yeah, he didn't seem fazed by that.
No, so when you look at the 60% report, will you see if he mentioned that? at all?
Okay, yeah.
Wonder if you worry about freezing if it's above ground like that.
No, I guess that's how they do it. He said they put a pipe across the river.
Yeah,
So that has to be in a structure,
Yeah,
and you think, it's not gonna be small.
well, you could bet if you don't do anything, some of the kids are gonna try and skateboard across it.
Right, and I just kept hearing Jim Carroll in my head, and I was like, integrated, which was, so Linda, thank you, that's a ton of work.
Mm.
It's really actually great to be able to take a step back, because we've been so heads down in the town plan. And as we think about what we want to be working on and prioritizing in 2024, it's very helpful for me to like have this list and to be kind of reminded and to imagine sort of how the calendar unfolds. And while these projects aren't necessarily requiring assistance from us at this moment, I think it's important for us to remember them as we start working on our projects.
Right.
When we're thinking about zoning, knowing that these sidewalks are coming and going and so on.
Well, and also recognizing capacity, because we generate a lot of work for Linda.
Yes.
And so if your plate is already full, I think it's really helpful for us to have realistic understanding of what it takes for us to be enthusiastic about something else.
Right. That's a very good point. Yes.
Like you said, every decision has downside.
Right. Right.
Consequences.
Every decision.
Every
has a-
proposal has every alternative, you said, I think,
Right.
has a drawback. Yep. Okay, anything else, Linda?
No, that was.
Okay,
That was
that's
it.
plenty. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so moving on, does any of the planning commission members have any updates to share with your colleagues?
I have. The Conservation Commission is also going to be at the select board meeting on Thursday for two things. The Davis Farm is very, very close to being permanently conserved. And so they have submitted an application to tap into the Conservation Reserve Fund for $35,000. Again, that would just bridge that last gap in their funding to make that all happen. And so we're recommending to the select board that they release that money. And so hopefully that will happen on Thursday. That's been a long process and everyone's very excited to see it cross the finish line. And then we are also recommending to the select board to consider allowing us to apply for 2 grants from the Vermont Community and Urban Forestry Program. Basically to help us with our ash tree inventory removal, the whole 9 yards, because that is a very large amount of money that the town is going to need to spend, and so every bit of help that we can get will go a long way. And also what's interesting about that is the one that we're actually eligible for in terms of the Emerald Ash Borer. One of the criteria is that you have to, your treatment area or your work area has to be within a 1 mile radius of a village center, a designated village center. So that is always a good reminder of how important those designations can be, because we wouldn't be eligible if we didn't have the designated centers. And then, we're applying for a second one, which is basically just tree related, but not ash tree. So hopefully the select board will agree to allow us to move forward with that. And then Susan and I are planning to attend the Trails Committee meeting next week. Again, to talk with them a little bit more about our ideas of having them expand their scope to include more of the bike bicycle pedestrian sort of aspect of their work and include that in addition to some of the trail work that they're doing. So we'll see how that goes. And then I think Wendy was gonna talk about this next, of
Yeah.
the renewable energy thing.
Yeah, we ended up at a meeting / potluck that Peter Ehrlich, that's how you pronounce Peter's last name? Peter attended one of our meetings not too long
Yeah.
ago to talk about how he would like zoning regulations to reflect that new construction require heat and water, home heating and heating one's water with renewable 85% renewable energy. And he hosted sort of an informational gathering for other Jericho folks that are interested in supporting this idea. And basically they're using the they're mostly referencing the South Burlington ordinance that lays this out. Burlington also has something similar, but I think the South Burlington one would be more relevant to what he would like to see done here in Jericho. So basically, it's all new construction, 85% renewable energy for home heat and water. There are requirements to verify that the new builds indeed meet that criteria upon certificate of occupancy. And there's this is South Burlington, not suggesting that this would be Jericho, but this is like the model that is under consideration. And then a fine structure for if the house does not meet that, and it's for residential and commercial.
There's the cost impact of that on construction.
That was one of my questions to
Yeah.
them, and saying like, and talking about that, we are in our town plan and it is a priority for affordable and missing middle income. So what is like the cost up front versus, the cost savings over time? How would that impact the cost of getting into a house for folks? So
Yeah.
They want to do some more research on it, but I do think they're going to approach the select board and meet back to our group too sometime in the near term to talk more about how to operationalize it.
And that's the Energy Task Force.
He's
Or is it a
also,
separate group.
well, it's a separate group, but I think he's also a member of the Energy Task Force, so he's going to bring it to the Energy
I
Task
see.
Force
Okay.
and get their support.
Yep.
Because
Okay.
there was a couple other folks from the Energy Task Force at that meeting. Did I get
No.
everything?
Yeah, there were.
Yeah. Maybe one. Maybe he's not on it anymore.
Yeah, well, I think it was a former member, but
Okay,
anyway, whatever. Yeah, like-minded.
yes. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? Anything else?
Nope.
Anything?
Affordable Housing Committee meets next week, no?
Yep.
So.
Okay.
And you're having a speaker too.
Oh, right.
Oh,
You're
yeah,
having a speaker.
That sounds really good.
Who's your speaker?
I don't know.
It is somebody from the CVOEO,
No,
which I love saying,
Yeah, this one's,
Yeah.
and talking about,
I wrote it down.
it's in my new.
I put it on my calendar.
What, you'll probably find it faster than me.
I don't know. It requires me forgetting on the internet.
It's somebody Yancey talking about,
Corinne Yancey, project manager, CVOEO's Fair Housing Project. She'll be introducing their Striving for Equity project, which aims to support local housing committees and promote avenues for citizen housing advocacy, so that across the state, we increase the amount of inclusive, affordable housing and meet our local housing needs. So she's from Striving for Equity project.
I'll report back the week after.
Okay. Actually, no, it'll be
next year.
It'll be
Next
in
year,
January.
yeah.
Right, okay, so that's a good segue. So, do we have any other business? Anything new? Anybody wants to raise? Just that we're gonna starting to work on the work plan. So our next meeting then will be, the planning commission will be January 2nd. And I think Linda and I are hoping to use that meeting to really, have a work plan sketched out. Hopefully when we come to that meeting and have everybody contribute ideas for what our priorities for the kind of the first quarter should be and build out our list. Because there's always the downside, there's always trade-offs. There's, all these projects that Linda just went through that we could work on. We'll know about the grant by then. We can kind of start organizing about zoning updates. We'll probably also January 2nd or 16th, assuming that our first big project will be to undertake updating of the character-based zoning as part of this village center zoning. We had talked a while back that maybe one of the first steps would be for everyone just to understand what is form-based code. How did Jericho bring that into the character-based zone, and kind of as setting the stage, and then looking at what we understand to be some of the challenges with that, so that we're better informed before we dive in and come up with ideas for how to improve it.
Yes. As preparation for that, do we have any communications between Tetro and other folks talking specifically about the objections they had to the form-based code?
Yeah, we received,
I know I've seemed to recall some of those, but.
yeah, we
Right.
received a list
Mhm.
from the, an architect, Bill Gardner, and also the
Right.
Wisdom House Development Group, both of whom have worked on plans for Riverside. So they've tried to they've come up with plans for various uses to comply with the character-based zone, and then made a list of all the issues that they had, like why was it a problem? And David White has already received those items and he's already reviewed them. That's all from the point of view, though, of like one specific applicant. And I think it'll be helpful for us to take a step back and think about it: housing, vibrant village centers, connectivity, more like from the town plan point of view.
Yep.
So that's what we know so far. And David also has worked with form-based code quite a bit. There are parts of Burlington that use form-based code. He's very familiar with the consultant that Jericho used many years ago to develop our code. And so he has he has his own ideas about how our code could be improved. I think he agrees it's overly complicated.
Yeah, if I could respectfully also suggest, we might want to have, in addition to David's perspective, if there's a way, okay, Linda, I'm sorry, Linda, but you can assign it back. If there's anything else in the planning world, because once upon a time, form-based code was it. It was considered like the panacea to solve all of our problems, right? And now all of a sudden it's not it, right? And so I just wonder, again, it's one of those, it had its heyday. I imagine there's a bunch beyond just what David knows or these two experiences.
Right.
Where there was like, why was it such a big deal? And everybody thought it was going to solve all our problems, and why is it not? But which problems it still does solve, right? Like it didn't do everything,
Yeah.
but it did some things. So I don't know.
It's a little like religion and politics. You definitely, I mean, there's a ton of information online
Yeah.
in general about it. And there are some practitioners that are very much in favor and some that are very much opposed. But you're right, we can like expand our view a little bit and try to learn as much as we can.
Are we
I just-
talking about doing away with form-based code, or are we talking about modifying the form-based code that we have?
We applied in terms of modifying the form-based code that we have.
That was my understanding.
Simplifying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
simplifying.
Thank you for that
Mo-
clarity.
Modifying with the goal of simplifying. I'm not
Yes.
sure we want to throw out everything. I think when my understanding of listening to the conversation the last few years is that when it was written, it was very responsive to a lot of vague, sentimental statements about goals for protecting the bucolic character and all the things, and not having flat roofs like some neighboring towns have. But those are some really vague things to apply into actual zoning.
That's really
And,
helpful.
and so I think what we ended up with was like the Union Bank with a 45-degree slant on the roof and the requirement that everything in that area has to match the church. And that's not realistic or energy efficient, or it leaves a lot of possibility out. So I don't, my understanding was the form-based code can still work. The concept can still work, just we maybe went a little overboard.
It's like the pendulum.
Yes, or the public comments of what we don't want were interpreted in such a way that it's not a real place.
Yeah.
You can't
That's-
actually build it.
And maybe that's part of our
Mhm.
education too, for those of us who weren't here, was paying attention.
Well, I was also gonna suggest, since we have this nice long break and, you definitely need an excuse to like steal away from your in-laws when they're in your living room for 5 days, would be to cuddle up with a good printed out copy of the character-based zone in Jericho, so that you can hit the ground running and,
pictures.
yeah,
There
hit the ground running in January with at least like being
Yeah.
versed.
And just
I
look
wouldn't
at-
say
yeah.
well versed, but just
No,
versed.
exactly. Just look at it from the lens of like, if you sat there with a blank piece of paper, not being an architect, and you had to draw a little village based on that,
Or a little building.
or just one building?
Yeah.
What would you come up with? And then if you just cut and paste that building and build them all like that, you'd be like, oh gosh, like what happened?
Right. So if everybody could do that, that would be
Sure.
great. And then did we have anything else in mind yet for January?
We may end up getting the public information meeting about the sidewalk. Second meeting in June, but I'm not ready to say that's for sure yet.
Wastewater.
Okay,
And wastewater, well, the
Well-
wastewater meetings would be not at the planning commission. meeting.
Right.
right.
That's
But
what
maybe
it
us
is.
strategizing
That would
about
be-
how we
yeah.
can support those
Yeah.
meetings with messaging or
Yeah.
presentation
Yeah.
or whatever.
And when you get that, will you send that to us, the report that's supposed to come out today?
I will, once it's been reviewed and analyzed for accuracy.
Once it has the Linda
Once
stamp
you
of
have a safe
approval.
copy.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Do we have an executive session?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Move to adjourn?
Well, Sabina, should we adjourn?
I think we should.
Okay. Do you want to adjourn? You want to vote to adjourn?
I'll vote. I move that we adjourn.
Okay. Sarah seconds. Okay.
Second.
So
Let's adjourn.
we're adjourned.
I.
Okay.
Waiting for you.
Sorry. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we're adjourned.
Now we're adjourned.
Okay, so we can stop the
What- what-
recording.
Chris?